Welcome everybody to our webinar this afternoon. This is the first session of our fall K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series. Today our session is Digital Learning Trends, Making an Impact on Student Engagement and Development. My name is Riley McClure, and I'm our Product Marketing Manager for K-12 Teaching and Learning Solutions, and I'll be serving as your moderator for the series throughout this fall. Big thank you to Jenny Breister and Katie Gallagher from our K-12 marketing team, who will be helping to answer questions today in the chat. And all three of us will be joining you throughout this fall as we go through our series. As an FYI, we're always open to new ideas for topics for the series, so please let myself or Katie or Jenny know if you have any interest in presenting in the future, or if there's a particular topic that you'd love to see us cover in the future. And also, if you're interested in checking out past sessions, all of our webinars are recorded, and all you need to do is you can go to YouTube and search for the K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series playlist, and you can find that on the Blackboard TV YouTube channel. You can also go to the link you see on your screen here, tinyurl.com/bitsK12, and that'll take you right to the playlist. Additionally, new for this year, and we're really excited to share this with you all, is following this session, you'll receive an invitation to participate in our new professional learning community hosted on our new Blackboard community site. We're really excited to move this K-12 BITS PLC from the former location on course sites to our new community site. We've got it updated with lots of fresh content. So we're really hoping you'll join us there, and hoping we can augment our series with some ongoing collaboration and discussion outside of our webinars. So coming up this fall, we've got some great sessions. We'll hope you join us on this Friday as our own Claudine Townley will be presenting on portfolios and learn. And if you're interested in seeing what other sessions we have upcoming, please go to the link you see on your screen here, bbb.blackboard.com/K12bits, to register for any of our sessions coming up. So we'll go ahead and get started with our session today. Today's speaker is Julie Evans, CEO of Project Tomorrow. We're really excited to have Julie with us today. Project Tomorrow is an internationally recognized education nonprofit that focuses on improving learning opportunities for students through the effective use of STEM resources. Ms. Evans has been CEO of this organization since 1999, and throughout that tenure has created several innovative initiatives to impact education, including the heralded Speak Up Research Project, which annually collects and reports on the views of over 500,000 K-12 students, parents, and educators on education issues each year. Today, Julie will lead us in digital learning trends, making an impact on student engagement and development. The increased use of technology, both in school and out of school, has created an urgency for teachers to embrace digital learning to make the student educational experience more productive and personal. Our annual Speak Up National Research Project provides an exclusive window into the views of education leaders, teachers, and students on personalized learning and innovative learning environments. In this webinar, we'll share the latest Speak Up national findings from over 500,000 K-12 students, parents, and educators, with an emphasis on how the use of digital content, tools, and resources in innovative classrooms are having a large impact on students' engagement and development of critical college and career-ready skills. So Julie, if you're ready, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Hey Riley, before we hand it over to Julie, let's just get a quick show of hands using the green check mark if you can hear. There was some chat that some folks weren't able to hear audio yet. Great. And then, Riley, could you take it back to the audio slide really quickly so that we can point out to Jillian where those controls are? Yep, so in the audio video pane in the upper right, there's a screenshot of it on the right-hand side of this slide. You need to slide your voice bar all the way to the right. Perfect. Okay, so it looks like we're getting green checks from most people. I'm sorry for the interruption. And go ahead, Riley.
All right, Julie, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Riley, and thank you to everyone for being here with us today. I'm so excited to be part of Blackboard's K-12 Innovative Teaching Series and to be the kickoff for this year, so this is really exciting. You know, as we're all coming back to school over the past month, the idea of making an impact on student engagement and development is top of mind, and so I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to share with all of you some of the digital learning trends that we're getting out of the Speak Up data to help to inform your work. So hopefully we'll stimulate some new conversations, some new discussions. You'll learn some new things to take back to your schools and districts, and I'm especially looking forward to our Q&A time today, where we can actually engage in a dialogue. So thank you to everybody for being here, and thank you to my good friends at Blackboard for inviting me to be part of this. So a couple different things that we're going to do today. I'm going to start off talking about the pulse of digital learning. What are those key trends? And we'll be looking at specifically Speak Up 2014 data findings. I'll tell you some more about that in a moment. But then we're going to do a deeper dive specifically for this particular webinar today, where we're going to look at the impact of digital learning, the perspective of students as well as teachers, and then what do we need to get to that next level? So what's important for us to be thinking about, particularly here as students are back in school, to really get to that next impact level of digital learning. I'm also going to share with you some information about how you can participate in Speak Up 2015, and then also where you can get some resources, some additional reports, including a brand new Digital Learning Trends report that we released at the ISTE conference with our friends at Blackboard. Okay, so let's dive into it, folks. So I've got sort of an interesting idea, and some of you may have had the same experience or maybe experiencing the same thing. But over about the last 18 to 20 months, it appears to me that there is something new in the air of schools around this idea of digital learning. It just feels different. When I'm having conversations, whether that's with superintendents, with principals, with teachers, with parents, with students, everyone appears to be talking about digital learning in a different way. Now, some of the things that we're hearing people talking about, and these may be things that you're talking about also, are some of these. So from a classroom standpoint, lots of new classroom models, whether it's in implementation or acceptance or the idea of trying some different classroom models. This idea of connecting digital learning with global skill development, the important workplace or college and career-ready skills that we're all talking about. Where are the intersections with the use of digital tools and content? You know, also I'm hearing a greater emphasis in terms of conversation around connectivity, whether that's connectivity at school, the quality of that connectivity, or connectivity at home. So some of you may be part of these more recent conversations around the homework gap. I don't know if any of you have heard that phrase yet, but this idea of students maybe being assigned digitally based homework or internet-based homework, but then not having connectivity at home to be able to accomplish that. So lots more emphasis around that. And then also this idea of what do we need to do to change teacher practice around the use of digital tools. And we're seeing some really strong evidence coming from the use of mobiles and digital content as a good way to do that. Now those were from the classroom or institutional school standpoint. Key trends from our research about students and their use of technology include this sort of abbreviated list here. I've been talking for quite a while about the fact that for this particular generation of students, learning is in fact a 24/7 enterprise for them. Their formal school day is just a small piece, a small part of what learning looks like for them in the grander scale. And as part of that is this whole idea of blurring of the informal and formal learning spaces. You know, we used to talk about after school as being informal, or if students visited a museum or took part in a summer program, that was informal learning. It's funny, though, because today's students talk about it all as learning. They aren't making those same differentiations that we made in the past. I'm particularly intrigued with this idea of students as content producers, not just consumers. And we're seeing that being especially predominant in the arts, which is really interesting, where students are seeking out audience for content that they're creating, particularly, as I said, in the arts field. Of course, lots of conversation around game-based learning. We're going to talk a little bit today about self-directed learning. But from the student perspective, the overall theme is a desire for greater personalization. Now, some of you that are familiar with Speak Up may remember that Speak Up started because we were interested in closing that connection, that gap, between the way students were living and learning using technology outside of school and how technology was being served up to them in their school day. Well, that gap still exists, folks, and the students are more interested than ever in making sure that their school-based learning experiences look and feel more like the personalized learning experiences that they're having outside of school. So along these different trends, we're also seeing, as I mentioned before, this new feeling in the air is really a new sense of urgency, particularly from administrators, to get it right this time. So we've all been talking about the promise of technology to transform education, and there's been a lot of investments that have been made, whether that's in infrastructure or content or teacher professional development. But as I said, just within the last 18 to 20 months, I'm getting a sense from administrators that they are more focused than ever in making sure that the investments that they've made and the efforts that are going forward are having a real impact on student learning. And overwhelmingly across the student population, the teachers, the administrators, the librarians, the tech leaders, and even the parents, all are focused in on the fact that to make sure that students are well prepared for the future, we need to have a different kind of learning experience for them, a type of learning experience that's going to prepare them to be able to be successful in this highly globalized, highly information-intensive economy. Given all of that, though, the reality is that sometimes knowing it and seeing it are two different things, as Suzanne Collins mentions here. You may be familiar with that name as the author of The Hunger Games as well as Mockingjay. And I think that's really where we are today in terms of digital learning. In some regards, we know it when we see it, but in other regards, we may be seeing things through different lenses than different people in our schools and districts. So this idea of having a different perspective or different set of perspectives on the value of digital learning, how it's being implemented, what needs to happen next, is very much prevalent, I believe, in our K-12 schools and districts. And we see that coming up in the data, in fact, as well. It's very much like looking at this picture, and some of you may have seen this picture before. As you look at this, some of you may see the woman that appears to be walking with the long swishy skirt. Maybe there's some leaves involved there. Others of you may see the very predominant face that has a very predominant nose and deep, dark-set eyes. Some of you may see both. Some of you might not see either of those images. And that, I think, really sort of sums up where we are with digital learning today. We're seeing things, as I mentioned before, through different lenses, from different perspectives. And so that obviously has an impact on the success of our initiatives, and also how do we know what we need to do to move forward. Now, with the other thing that we have seen over the last couple of years is this value, increasing value being placed on data. So getting beyond the anecdote, getting beyond the mythology, getting beyond the assumption. And that's where Speak Up and the Speak Up data can really help to inform your digital learning plans and opportunities, because it gives you the tangible evidence that you need to be able to move forward with a new initiative, to reinforce the current initiatives that you have, or even to start thinking about what you need to do for the future. So just to bring everybody up to date, you may already be familiar with the Speak Up Research Project, but I'll give you kind of the 1, 2, 3 on it so you have a context for when we get into the data itself. So Speak Up is a national research project. It's conducted using online surveys and focus groups. Each year we create a specialized set of surveys for different audiences, for students, for teachers, for parents, administrators of all different kinds, community members, and every other year we do a special survey for college students and teacher preparation programs. Now, it's an unusual research project because we make the online surveys available to any K-12 school or district that wants to use them to collect your own feedback from your stakeholders. This is 100% a free service that Project Tomorrow provides to K-12 schools and districts, public schools as well as private, independent, parochial schools, charter schools, magnet schools, virtual schools. And so we make the surveys available to you and then give you back all of your locally collected data with the national data and in many cases your state level data to also use for benchmarks. So this is part of our nonprofit mission as a nonprofit organization, is to help you with understanding the views of your stakeholders to inform your digital learning plan. So we totally understand that in many cases some folks like to create their own surveys or maybe even contract with someone to do survey work. Please understand that our position on this is that we're the experts in creating these type of surveys and in doing all the back-end research as to what are the most appropriate questions to ask, and we make it 100% free to schools and districts so that you don't need to use your instructional funds to be able to get this type of research for you. So the data is used every year to inform policies, plans, programs, funding initiatives at all levels of governance. Since we started this in 2003, we've had about 4 million surveys that have been submitted to us nationwide. The types of questions that are on the surveys are about learning and teaching with technology, as you would expect. We do ask different questions of different audiences. We ask students about their career interest in STEM. We've also been asking them about their interest in learning coding, for example. We ask teachers about their professional development needs. We ask parents a really interesting set of questions about data privacy last year. We ask all the respondents to talk to us about the different emerging technologies that are in use both in and out of the classroom. And those might involve, as the list says here, mobile devices, games, social media, different classroom models as well. One of the things that makes the Speak Up surveys a little different is that we don't just ask questions about what are you doing. We also ask folks to talk to us about the values or attitudes that they have about digital learning, as well as their expectations or aspirations for using digital tools. And that's across all the audiences, whether those are students, teachers, parents, or administrators. Now, what we're going to be sharing with you today is data from last fall. The Speak Up surveys were open from the beginning of October to the middle of December. We had a little bit over 521,000 surveys that were submitted nationwide. You can see there represent about 8,200 schools and 2,600 districts. Schools and districts sign up to participate in Speak Up, so we don't have a random individual student or individual teacher or even individual parent that takes the survey. It is all facilitated through the schools and districts so that then the resulting Speak Up data from that school or district then is sent back to the school or district to inform their plans. So you can see here the breakdown of the different audiences and also the breakdown based on the type of community where the surveys were taken. Okay, so let's jump into our Speak Up data here. We call it kind of a reality check. In some cases there might be some surprises here, and there may be some other things that you're sensing within your schools and districts as well, and I would love to hear that additionally. We're going to take a look at specifically some data from students, teachers, librarians, parents, and administrators. And as I mentioned before, some of the data findings are around activities, others are around attitudes, and then my favorite is to really think about what folks' aspirations or expectations are for using digital learning. And what I did is sliced it up so that you could have kind of 3 insights into the data findings. We poll on more than these 3 topics, but I thought for our very first innovative teaching series, it would be interesting to take a look at these 3 big buckets since lots of folks are talking about them. We're going to talk about mobile learning, we're going to talk about the use of digital content, and then we'll dive into new classroom models. Flipped learning, blended learning, virtual learning, all the things that folks are talking about. So let's jump in here first with mobile learning, and I'll share with you a couple key data highlights from mobile learning. So one of the first ones I want to share with you is that we asked students about the likelihood of their use of a mobile device within their school day to help with their schoolwork or class activities. And I pulled for you the national data from middle school students as well as high school students. So you can see, for example, that 58% of high school students said that they regularly use their own device of some kind, so a BYOD type program. About half as many in middle school said they have the same type of opportunity. About a third of students say that they've been provided a laptop by their school to be able to use. A smaller percentage say they had a tablet, and about the same percentage of tablet now is Chromebook, which is an interesting idea that we just started polling on. It was also interesting for us to take a look at all of these different devices as well as compare them to where students do not have access to any mobile devices within their school day to see if there was a difference in terms of the types of activities that students were able to do. So as you would imagine, the students that had a Chromebook or a tablet or a laptop that was provided to them by their school tended to do more digital learning activities, whether that was taking an online test, doing some research, using online textbooks, or even posting to class blogs. It also was interesting to take a look and see across those 3 primary types of devices, the differences there in terms of whether one type of device or another facilitated more digital learning in a very specific way. This again was a new question area that we pursued last year, and we'll be pursuing again this year as well. And so look forward to doing further analysis on that in the next couple of years. We also asked students as well as administrators to talk to us about how important it is for every student to be able to use a mobile device in school to support their schoolwork. And so these had some really interesting results. As you can see here, about 3/4 of the students, again middle school and high school students, said that they did think it was important for students to have access to a mobile device. However, the administrators seemed to be more bullish or more positive on the idea than even the students were. So quite often folks will say to me, well, why is that? Why didn't all of the students say 100%, or why didn't at least their numbers exceed the administrators' numbers? Well, I'll give you a little bit of sort of the insider perspective here on the Speak Up data, and this came to us through our focus groups. I have the wonderful pleasure of doing about 30 focus groups a year with K-12 students, teachers, parents, and administrators each year. And so when I polled students in the focus group about this and we had a conversation about it, we learned some very interesting things. First of all, the first thing is that students' preference is to use their own devices. Now, we may have known that as sort of a hunch, but it was nice to have that verified. Their preference is really to use a device that's highly personalized for them, where they don't have the same types of controls put around their usage that a school-provided device might have. The other second part of that is that the students told us that in many cases their personal devices are of higher functionality or better devices than the devices that are being provided to them by their school. And so this question actually got to this because at least 1/4 of the students told us that they were concerned that if they answered this too strongly, their school would provide them with devices, and what the students really want is to be able to use their own devices. So we thought that was really interesting. This idea of BYOD or BYOT, bring your own device, bring your own technology, of course has been a trend for the last couple of years. And so it was interesting for us to also see the change in administrator perspective on students using their own devices. So take a look at this number. I just think this is fascinating. In 2011, school and district administrators, a majority of them, 52%, said that students were not allowed to use their own devices. And yet just 3 years later, in 2014, that number had fallen to 23%. So obviously a big trend in perspective from a policy standpoint. Now folks, that is not to say that of course the BYOD, BYOT trend doesn't have some challenges associated with it, but it was interesting to see how quickly administrators changed their perspective on allowing students to use their own mobile devices. Now some of that may have been driven by the fact that students increasingly have access to their own mobile devices. So for quite a lot of folks that follow the Speak Up data, this is one of their favorite questions. It's where we ask students to talk to us about their personal access to mobile devices. These are devices not provided by school, but provided by parents, grandparents, whatever that might be. So you can see the breakdown here from kindergarten through 12th grade in terms of student access to digital readers, tablets, laptops, and smartphones. The big takeaway here, folks, should be that, in fact, students don't have just one device anymore. And in fact, increasingly, particularly in middle school and high school, students have multiple access points to different types of devices and may be carrying them at school. So that 9th grader this year may have not only a smartphone, as you can see from last fall, 82% of high school students had a smartphone, but he or she may also have a tablet or a digital reader in that backpack. They may have an opportunity to bring even a laptop into school as well. Now that increased access to multiple devices is actually creating another sort of interesting phenomenon, because while many of us are continuing to think about that one perfect device that we can put in the hands of students that can help them accomplish a wide range of different academic tasks, the students actually have transcended that approach. And increasingly they're telling us, both through the data as well as through focus groups, that they are differentiating the types of devices they are using based on the tasks that need to be done. So, for example, students that are laptop users as well as tablet users say that the laptop is the best device for writing a report. Even, as I said, even the students that have a tablet. For the students that have a tablet, however, their familiarity with the tablet means that they are more comfortable reading online textbooks, watching videos, and taking notes. And for both sets of students, the idea of using a smartphone for communications is still predominant. So just like many of us use different devices for different jobs, different tasks, the students are doing the same thing. So they have evolved to that same level of getting beyond the one-size-fits-all. Now, in terms of obstacles to using technology at school, and this is a question, by the way, that we have asked on the Speak Up survey since 2003, so it's been really interesting to watch it longitudinally. We saw an interesting new development this year. Traditionally, on this particular question, the idea of school filters and firewalls blocking websites that the students wanted to get to for schoolwork purposes was the number one complaint or frustration point that students had. And as you can see, it still is pretty predominant, particularly for high school students. But this was the first year that the top vote getter for both middle school and high school students was the fact they can't access their social media. So this idea of social media as being something on the side that was not fully integrated into student life is definitely a dated perspective. For today's students, it is part and parcel of their interaction with the world, their personal communications network, and the way they engage with both friends as well as experts. And so it was fascinating to see that come up as the number one obstacle for the first time this year. Now, in terms of social media, we did an interesting new set of questions this year where we asked students to comment on the different types of social media tools that they were using to help with schoolwork. And so we do see that students are using social media not just to connect with each other, but also as a vehicle for collaboration and creation. Students are using Instagram. Increasingly, students are following their teachers and experts on Twitter. Middle school students are particularly fond of YouTube as a vehicle, whether that's creating and or just watching videos, lots of video creation being done. And this idea of massively multiplayer online games, so as opposed to the individual player games, the idea of collaborative play is starting to get more and more attention, particularly from middle school boys. And a trend that we have seen over the last couple of years is obviously the decrease in students' dependency, shall we say, on Facebook as a particular social media. Now, all of the students are using different types of social media, and so it was interesting for us to track their frequency and fluency of use as well, and that's something that we will continue to do in the upcoming surveys. Let's talk a little bit here about digital content. And this is an area that we're spending a lot of time thinking about. In fact, we just finished up a National Science Foundation grant looking at the readiness of teachers to use digital content, and we'll be releasing that report over the next month or so. But in terms of teachers' usage of digital content in the classroom, that quite often is an interesting bellwether or litmus test for the level of integration or adoption or implementation of different types of digital tools. We thought it was particularly fascinating to see the increase from 2013 to 2014 in terms of teachers' use of videos, online curriculum in particular. We saw increases in terms of online textbooks and continue to see increases in terms of game-based environment, particularly around elementary teachers. But a really interesting trend line to continue to watch that around video. Now, the other thing that was interesting to us is when we disaggregated that digital content data based on whether or not the teachers told us they were teaching in a traditional classroom or a blended classroom, it was not as surprising, because we anticipated it, that we would see that actually the greatest usage was in the blended classroom environment. So the teachers that told us that they have implemented some type of blended classroom really were off the charts in terms of their use of various types of digital content. So taking this digital content conversation one step further is also an interesting idea from the principal perspective. We asked principals their take on digital content within instruction. What were the pros and what were the cons, or the benefits and the challenges? So as we would expect from principals, they talked about increased student engagement, extending the learning day. I think it's particularly interesting that they looked at digital content as helping to improve the relevancy and quality of the instructional materials that were being used in their classroom. And then also this idea, which sounds initially somewhat counterintuitive, that the incorporation of digital content would help improve their teacher skills with technology. Now that's interesting for a couple different points. One, it points to this increasing fascination or obsession that principals have with making sure that teachers are using technology effectively, and also the challenge associated with making sure that teachers have the right professional development and training that they need to be able to use digital content in particular most effectively. Now, when we asked principals about their challenges or the concerns, the idea of computer access or device access was something that was really important. The bandwidth issues, lots of conversations around that. But then this new area around evaluating quality of digital content, and this is one that we have seen been on the uptick for the last couple of years. As digital content is becoming more pervasive, and there's a lot more digital content that's available out there for schools and teachers to use, there's been this increasing little concern about the quality. So if I'm using a particular video in my classroom in a particular lesson, or I'm bringing in a piece of animation or an online article for students to read, how do I know that it is truly a high quality piece, an academically rigorous piece, a well-researched piece, for example? So we asked principals and teachers to tell us, how do you evaluate digital content quality? What are the markers that you look for that indicate to you that this is a quality product or resource that you can use within your classroom? And so some really interesting findings here. From the principal perspective, the ones that were most important to the principal was the idea that the content would be research-based. So it would have some level of authenticity or accuracy, or had been researched to yield the types of student achievement that the principals wanted within their school. Now, from the teacher perspective, the number one item or marker for them was that it could be modifiable. So that gets right to their idea of how they were going to use it in the classroom. So for the teachers, they placed high value on the ability to modify the content, that it was created by a teacher, and that also it was referred to them by a teacher. And so really interesting in terms of the different perspectives. Again, like that image that we looked at, the different lenses of looking at digital learning, that right within the same school, principals and teachers may actually be on different pages when they think about evaluating digital quality content. So how are teachers using digital content? This is a new set of questions that we asked this year because we did want to understand a little bit more about the actual process of digital content usage. So we asked teachers about their level of content manipulation. Again, remember the teachers told us that that was a high value marker for them. So interestingly, we see a disconnect between the teachers now and their librarians or media specialists that may be supporting their digital content usage. So from the teacher's perspective, only about a third said that they use the digital content just the way it is. They don't edit it, they don't manipulate it, they find that video online, they play it in the classroom. Librarians had a slightly different perspective. They told us that about 52% of their teachers are using the digital content that way. In terms of customizing the digital content, there were several different versions of this, whether they were customizing it by using some other online resources, being able to use it to get ideas for new lessons, or updating old lessons, was all very, very interesting and really spoke to the adoption process for teachers, whether they start off first being aware of the digital content and then start using it just as is and only start adopting it once they're more comfortable with it. It was also interesting to track that about 14% of teachers said that they create their own digital content. I recently had an opportunity to do a really interesting focus group at the ISTE conference in Philadelphia, where we were talking with teachers about their use of digital content, most specifically video. And it was fascinating that amongst 10 or 12 classroom teachers, only about 2 were actually creating their own videos at this point, but there was lots of interest from the other teachers as well. Okay, so let's get to sort of our third bucket of key trends I wanted to share with you today. And we're going to talk about new classroom models, whether that is virtual, blended, flipped, whatever that might be, whatever might be of interest to you. I also want to let you know that in just a couple of minutes we're going to open it up to your questions. So if you want to start putting some questions in the chat box, please feel free to do that as well. So in terms of different classroom models, we first wanted to get sort of a landscape or lay of the land as to the pervasiveness of different classroom models out there. So from a national perspective, about 84% of the teachers told us that they're teaching in a traditional classroom environment. Teachers, students there every day, might be using technology to support some instructional activities. About 14% of teachers told us that they have implemented a blended learning classroom, and we gave them a definition based on the Christensen Institute as well as the iNACOL definition so that they could relate to that. Only about 1% told us in that question that they have implemented a fully flipped learning class model, though you'll see in a moment a higher percentage say that they have experimented with flipped, so we still see that as emerging. And then obviously a smaller percentage also for virtual classes. In terms of that flipped learning, 14% of teachers say that they have flipped their classrooms to some extent. So they didn't necessarily call it a full flip. I don't even know if that's a phrase, a full flip. But they have experimented with flipping. More interestingly, I think, was that 17% were interested in trying it. Amongst the students, we gave them that same definition for blended learning, and 2/3 of students thought that that would be a good way for them to learn. What is also interesting to us is that when we actually look at student behavior, student activities using technology, it looks to us as if students are already self-blending. They're actually using digital tools such as videos, online games, online writing tools, and even social media to self-direct learning outside of school. Remember, I mentioned early on that for today's students, learning is a 24/7 enterprise. So it's not surprising that students are tapping into digital tools to self-direct their learning. I think what is more surprising is that in some cases, teachers I've talked to were not aware of this as an emerging trend. Now, in terms of virtual or fully online classes, about 73% of technology leaders told us that they actually do offer at this point some online classes for their students. Only about 27% said that they don't. For the most cases, it's broken down into students as well as educators. The thing that has been interesting to watch is that the changing complexion or breakdown of the students that are taking online classes or are being offered online classes by their schools and districts. So whereas traditionally, I think we were focused in on credit recovery, helping kids stay in school, maybe some remediation opportunities, increasingly we're seeing schools and districts are offering online coursework for students that want to get ahead, maybe want to get some college credit, maybe are interested in some different types of classes than what are offered at their school. Predominantly, the major audience, though, for online learning continues to be educators themselves, so online professional development for teachers, for administrators, and for librarians. Going back to students' interest in fully online classes, it appears that middle school students are a little bit more interested than their high school peers in taking an online class, and when asked about the subjects that they would like to take that online class in, middle school students came down pretty soundly on the idea of math, taking an online class in math, followed by some of the other subjects as you can see here. This online class in math is really very, very fascinating to us based on some focus group work that we did this year. So what we've seen is an emerging trend, particularly amongst middle school students, that tell us that they are taking an online class in math in addition to their brick and mortar face-to-face math class. Now this, I think, speaks to the increasing importance of math success as a gateway to advanced coursework in high school and also obviously to certain college career paths as well. And parents are understanding that more than ever before. And so in many cases, it's from a parent impetus that the students are taking this additional online class as a supplement, not a replacement, to their fully online, fully face-to-face math class. I also think it's interesting that when I was having this conversation with some middle school students who told me that that was what they were doing, that was what their math classes looked like, it was a hybrid, they had not told their face-to-face teacher. And so I think that's particularly fascinating as well when we think about teachers doing self-reflection on how well they are addressing student needs. Some of the teachers may not be aware of this trend either, of students taking online classes as a supplement to their face-to-face class. Now from a policy perspective, this was a question that we had asked a couple of years ago, so we brought it back up again. Asked parents, students, and administrators about if they think students should be required to take an online class as a graduation requirement. Now many districts have done that, some states have institutionalized that as well. And so we see where parents and administrators, the majority of parents and administrators think that's a good idea. 42% of middle school students think that's a good idea, and this is not based on them having prior experience taking an online class. Only about 3 out of 10 high school students thought that was a good idea. My focus group with high school students, no surprise to any of you that are here with us today, basically went like this. They said, we do not need any more requirements. We're getting ready to graduate. So they didn't want anything added onto their plate, which makes tons of sense. So I gave you a little bit of some key findings and a review of some of the data findings. I want to take you now to this idea of the impact statements and share with you a little bit more data there before we get into your questions. So what's the impact of digital learning on student outcomes? Well, increasingly we see teachers are linking the use of digital tools and content and resources to the development of students' workplace skills, or the type of outcomes that are around communications, creativity, critical thinking, and collaboration skills. Even more soundly amongst teachers in blended classrooms are making that linkage as well. From the teachers themselves, they talk about the impact of their own effectiveness as giving them the opportunity to create more interactive and relevant lessons, to facilitate more student learning, and giving them more time to differentiate instruction. I especially like that they feel more connected to their students. The high school students mirror a lot of what the teachers say in terms of the impact of using technology to support their learning and the development of those skills. And I was particularly pleased to see that 71% of high school students said that teachers are important to their learning. So the opportunity that they have to communicate with their teachers more is all part and parcel of that enhanced learning experience for the students. We asked administrators, what do you need for digital learning success? If you're starting a new digital initiative, whether that's mobile or digital content or a blended learning environment, what do you need to ensure that success? And I just thought this was fascinating. So for the top 3 responses are around infrastructure. The bottom is more about implementation. But right here in the center, in numbers 4, 5, and 6 in priority ranking, sort of like a fulcrum, is the idea of teacher knowledge, teacher buy-in, teacher skills, the idea of making sure that teachers are comfortable using these digital tools, they have the skills that they need, and they have the right attitudes and values around that. When we ask teachers about their professional development needs, we continue to see, as we have over the last couple of years, teachers are interested in building up their own capacity. So using technology to differentiate instruction as first and foremost, and then getting into some of the skill-based activities around using games, tablets, how to identify digital content. And when asked about their preferences for digital learning professional development, what the teachers tell us is make it local and make it contextually relevant. They like the big conferences. They like going to the conferences. They like hearing from experts. But they're also more keenly aware of the value of school-based training, peer-to-peer training, teacher-led training, and even activities that are self-directed where they get to moderate and pursue their own professional development paths. We also think in terms of this idea of increasing the impact of digital learning that it's such an interesting proposition around the changing role of librarians. I'm actually going to be speaking about this at the AASL conference in November, School Librarians Conference. But to hear librarians talk about their changing priorities, they continue to work very closely with students, of course, on research and digital citizenship, but they're also increasingly helping to build up that capacity of the teacher, whether that's helping the teacher find digital content, training the teachers, and actually helping teachers create content themselves. And then probably the last leg of the stool is thinking ahead to the future. So this is a very interesting question that we've asked over the last couple of years, where we ask principals what are their expectations for those new teachers that they're going to hire. So that next great generation of teachers, what type of experiences do you want them to have when they're still in their pre-service program around the use of digital tools? And it starts to cover and really looks like an interesting snapshot of all the things that we've talked about today, whether it is school-to-home communications, creating differentiated learning experiences, incorporating digital content into instruction, setting up different types of classroom models, looking at types of mobile devices, and really an ongoing digital learning experience for the teachers themselves. So I started off talking about something new in the air in the schools today. Maybe you've started to get that same sense, or maybe this tweaked some of your imagination to start looking for that. And so when folks will say to me, so what is coming up next? What are the things that we should be anticipating? That's where we find that having schools and districts participate and speak up is incredibly valuable, because you learn from your stakeholders not only what are they doing with digital learning, but what is the valuation of that for them? How important is it to be able to have access to a mobile device? How interested are they in creating a blended learning environment? What are they thinking about in terms of the impact of digital content on student learning? So when we ask the schools and districts that have participated and speak up with us over the last couple of years as to why they participate, we hear a wide range of different objectives that they have. But this idea of creating a new digital learning playbook is one that resonates with many of them. So if you have not participated with us before, or if you have, I do hope that you will participate in Speak Up 2015 to be able to collect a lot of the same type of data that I shared with you today, so that you can understand from your own school or district what the trends are from your stakeholders. Remember that by participating in Speak Up, by having access to the online surveys, we're actually collecting for you your own stakeholder feedback, and then we'll give that back to you in early February of 2016. So the surveys open up on October 1st. They are online surveys. You can come and visit us at tomorrow.org and register your school or district to participate. We will have again this year grade level and reading level appropriate surveys for students as well as parents. The parent survey is in English and Spanish as well. Teachers, librarians, school site and district administrators, technology leaders, community members, and then 2 brand new surveys that you're all on the inside here because we haven't even released this information publicly yet. But we're going to have a special Speak Up survey for science teachers to look at how science teachers are specifically implementing technology within their instructional plans. And then also a brand new survey for district communications officers and PR leaders within districts to really understand the role of digital tools in that school-to-home communications and in establishing greater connections within their own communities. So insider information for all of you that are here with us today. I hope that you will plan to participate in Speak Up so that you can learn about the feedback from your stakeholders and also have a voice in national policy associated with digital learning. Every year we create national reports and we share those reports with Congress in congressional briefings in Washington, D.C. Last year's report on digital learning 24/7 is available from our website. That is the report that we released to Congress. And we also regularly inform different government agencies. In fact, next Monday I'll be meeting with the FCC to talk about some of our latest Speak Up findings as they start thinking about ways to modernize some of the communication services that they provide. We have on our website a number of different targeted and thematic reports as well as presentations, podcasts, and webinars, and also information about other services that we provide. And I mentioned at the beginning that a lot of the data that I shared with you today is from a brand new 2015 Trends in Digital Learning report that we do every year with our friends at Blackboard. We release this at a special breakfast in Philadelphia at the ISTE conference. And so it's a nice way to get your hands around a lot of the data that we shared here today, and something that you can also share with your colleagues, your peers, school board members, community members, even parents about some of the trends that are happening today. So with that, I'm going to take a pause and see if possibly you have some questions. Would love to be able to engage in some conversation with you. And if not questions, maybe you've got some comments on the data. Maybe there were things here that resonated with you or surprised you. Would love to hear those items as well.
And for everybody on the call, you can feel free to either type your questions or comments into the chat, or if you press the talk button, you can go ahead and chime in and ask Julie directly.
I agree with Katie, but don't be shy, folks. Ask me some questions, or as I said, give me some comments. I think that it's always interesting to hear what your perspective is on these trends that we have. I hope this was interesting information and valuable information for you. Please note that the data that I shared today was only a small snapshot of the data that is collected during Speak Up. And so please feel free, if you have some other questions, you can comment or you can contact me as well, because we may very well have had some other data that we didn't share here as well. So I did see a question where someone asked, how do we find out? Carolyn asked, how do we find out if our district participated? If you would contact us, and you can either contact me directly or Jenny Hassert at our offices, Project Tomorrow offices. Here's my Twitter handle as well as my email address. We can look that up for you and see if your district participated or if your school participated. We'd be happy to do that. We can also let you know who is your contact for Speak Up if you are interested in participating that way as well. So we had a comment here, very interesting, Amy. Amy's talking to us about how interesting to see how kids are or aren't using Facebook, Twitter, and more. She teaches in an online school the most effective ways to communicate with students and parents. So one of the interesting questions, and we're asking it again this year if you are really interested in this and you haven't participated in Speak Up, is that we give students as well as parents a list of sort of the top 15 social media vehicles. And we ask them about their frequency of using those different tools. So it went all the way from all the time to never. And so that was a really fascinating slice and an interesting way to understand what types of tools your students are using and also what types of tools your parents are using and are comfortable with as well. So both of those questions will be on this year's Speak Up surveys again. So if you have not participated in the past, that might be an interesting reason to participate so that you can get that data. That was a really, that's a difficult question, as you can imagine, since that social media environment is changing so quickly, it's moving so quickly. We've done extensive amounts of focus grouping with students around the different types of social media tools that they're using and feel that we have a pretty good handle on the predominant tools that students are using.
Julie, this is Katie.
Well, folks, it's been
I just thought it was really interesting, the data around students beginning to take actions where they're already blending their learning regardless of what their school is doing. I have 4 children who range from 4th grade to 9th grade now, and they were all at schools that really didn't use any technology in the classroom until the past year. But I can personally attest to the fact that they were doing all of those things on your slide that was showing that students are already blending their learning even before it happens in the classroom.
I agree with you, Katie. I really think that this idea of student self-directed, interest-driven learning is a really interesting emerging trend and one that schools and districts need to be paying attention to and teachers need to be paying attention to. You know, the days of the student coming into the classroom as an empty vessel and having the teacher be the all-knowing master of content and filling that empty vessel is really in the past because students have so much access to different types of experts and different types of information. And so I think that is a really interesting trend. So Jill asked a question here. I think we still have another second or two that we can talk. Jill asked a question here about Google Drive and Google Classroom, and in fact it is. And so we have been we started last year, we'll be continuing again this year, tracking how pervasive those tools are within schools and districts, how schools and districts and classrooms are using those tools for collaboration, what types of things teachers are doing, what types of things students are doing as well. And so obviously that's another fast-moving, dynamic, changing environment. But it's been very interesting to see the receptivity of that as well as some other tools that are out there as well. So thank you, Jill, for that question.
And Julie, I think Jan had a question in the chat. Jan asked, what happens to the data you collect from each school? Are you sharing it with other organizations?
That's a great question, Jan. Thank you. We don't share any school-based or district-based data with anyone except the school or district in their contact that they signed on. When you sign on for Speak Up as the school or district contact, there is a passcode that gets you administrative rights to the data, so you have confidential access to that data, and then also another code that's used by the participants to take the survey. But that data is confidential for the school or district. We don't share that with anyone else. We share out the national data, such as I shared here with you today, and then in many cases the states share out their state-level data with their stakeholders. But Project Tomorrow and Speak Up is not in the gotcha game. We are not in the comparative school game. We are not in pitting one school against another or a district against another or even a state against another. So you can feel comfortable that the data that is being shared through Speak Up from your stakeholders is confidential to the school or district, and you have confidential access to that. Well, I want to thank everyone. I'm going to turn it back over to Riley.
Thanks, Julie. Really appreciate. Oh,
I just want to thank everyone for being here as well, but I'm giving it back over to you, Riley.
Thanks, Julie, and big thanks to you as always for partnering with us and for joining us today to share all this great data. If anybody has any questions about where they can get their hands on the digital trends report, we can go ahead and we'll add that link into the chat. You can also contact myself or Julie or Katie, any of us, and we're happy to answer any additional questions you have. And thank you to everybody who was able to join us today and participating in our first K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series session of the semester. Again, if anybody is interested in presenting or if you have topics you'd like to see us cover, feel free to reach out to me. Here up on the screen, you've got my Twitter handle and my email address, and happy to discuss anything you might be interested in. And also, we've got another session coming up on Friday. This will be a Blackboard-led session. Claudine Townley, one of our solutions engineers, will be focusing on the portfolios functionality in Blackboard Learn. So that should be another great how-to session. And then also, don't forget to register for the rest of the sessions in our series this fall, and also sign up for our online professional learning community, and we can take some of these discussions about digital learning offline and augment some of the discussions that we're having here during the series. This is a new effort that we're doing that we're really excited about, so hoping to see you join that group and talk to you soon. So again, thank you everybody for joining today, and we're going to go ahead and end the recording now, and hope to see you throughout this fall. Thank you.